The night sky above the fallen capital felt heavy like a wounded giant, its broken towers glowing faintly under the dying embers of war. Smoke drifted through the ruins like tired ghosts, carrying the smell of metal, ash, and memories that would never be repaired. Human soldier Rourke walked through the shattered courtyard with slow steps, feeling each heartbeat echo through the silence like a drum that refused to die. His armor was cracked, burned, and stained, yet his posture stayed firm because he had survived when many others had not. He did not feel proud of it, only responsible, burdened, awake in a world that had forgotten peace. Before him stood the Grand Hall of Crowns, its crystal pillars cracked, but still shimmering under the pale light of the twin moons. Inside, guarded by elite soldiers who now knelt in defeat, waited the one being everyone feared and admired at the same time, the alien queen of the Arinth Empire, the woman whose decisions had shaped half the galaxy, the ruler whose culture demanded loyalty so deep that even speaking against her was considered blasphemy. Yet now, by the old law of conquest, she was obliged to grant one wish to the victor who stood before her, and fate had chosen that victor to be a lone human soldier with tired eyes, but an unwavering heart. Rourke stepped inside the hall, each footstep echoing like a hammer inside a cathedral. The queen sat upon a throne carved from living crystal, the seat shimmering with slow pulses of soft blue light that matched her breathing. She was not chained, not threatened, not broken. Her posture was tall, steady, regal, yet her eyes carried an emotion he did not expect. Not anger, not hatred, but something quieter, something curious, something almost human. Her gaze followed him as he approached, and the entire court fell into a silence so deep that even the crackling fires outside felt distant. The High Judge announced the ritual with a trembling voice, declaring that by the ancient victory law, the human soldier had earned a single wish, something the queen could not refuse. The hall held its breath, expecting requests for power, for riches, for military command, or even the queen's crown itself. Many conquerors before had demanded empires from this tradition, and the Arinth had been forced to obey. The guards watched Rourke closely, ready for betrayal or cruelty. The scholars whispered among themselves, trying to predict what greed he would show. The queen simply waited, her face calm but her eyes filled with quiet storms. Rourke stood before her, close enough to see the faint glow in her silver blue skin, close enough to hear the soft hum of her throne responding to her heartbeat. He could feel every gaze pressing against his shoulders, but the only person he truly saw was her, the queen who led armies, who carried the weight of worlds, who was now waiting for a human to decide her fate with a single sentence. He opened his mouth, but before he spoke, memories flashed in his mind, the faces of civilians caught in crossfire, the cries of children hiding beneath steel overhangs, the desperate fear of a galaxy that had forgotten what mercy looked like. Rourke remembered the moment he realized the queen was not the monster many believed her to be. He remembered seeing her command ships to spare hospitals, orphan ships, medical convoys. He remembered hearing survivors whisper that the queen fought not for conquest, but to keep her empire from collapsing under rebellion and chaos. He breathed out slowly, forcing the entire hall to lean in as if gravity itself demanded they listen. Then his voice came, calm, steady, carrying the weight of everything he had seen. "I choose your life," he said. The hall erupted in shock, gasps exploding like sparks in dry air. Several guards reached for their weapons out of instinct. Others froze completely. The High Judge forgot his own breath. The scholars stared as if someone had rewritten the laws of physics right before them, but no reaction compared to the queen's. For the first time, her composure cracked. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, a ripple of pure disbelief flashing across her regal calm. It was not fear, it was not outrage. It was something raw, something vulnerable, something she probably had not shown anyone in years. Her priceless reaction made the room tremble with unspoken emotion. "You choose me," she whispered in a voice that felt like wind brushing over shattered glass. "Not power, not land, not command," Rourke answered gently. "I choose your life, I choose your freedom. I choose to protect you instead of taking anything from you." Silence fell again, but this time it was different. It was not the cold silence of fear, it was the warm, trembling silence of a world trying to understand something too human, too unexpected, too powerful to ignore. The queen stared into his eyes as if searching for deception, but found none. What she found instead was a man who believed that saving a life was stronger than taking one, especially the life of someone who carried the fate of millions. Ancient symbols carved across the crystal walls began to glow, reacting to the meaning of his choice. The court gasped again as they realized the consequence. By choosing the queen herself, Rourke had awakened an old and sacred law older than most of the empire. A law that bound the queen to her chosen protector in destiny and command. A law that could not be refused. A law that could reshape the galaxy. Her breath caught in her chest. Her pulse flickered through her throne. And she whispered only one trembling sentence. Human soldier, your choice may save us all, or destroy everything. And Rourke, steady as a mountain, replied softly, then let me stand with you. The hall did not breathe for several long moments, as if the entire empire itself paused to understand the human soldier's choice. The queen remained still on her shimmering throne, her expression a delicate mixture of awe and disbelief. Yet beneath that calm surface something deeper stirred, something ancient, something bound to old laws that no one had dared to invoke for centuries. When Rourke said he chose her life, he did not know he was unlocking a chain of destiny with roots older than any empire map. But everyone in the hall felt the shift, felt the air thicken with history and danger. The High Judge finally found his voice, though it shook like cracked stone. He declared that the sacred law of bonding had been invoked, and his words echoed through the crystal chamber like thunder. The guards stiffened, the scholars exchanged fearful glances, and the queen lowered her gaze briefly as if absorbing a blow only she understood. This was not a simple victory wish anymore. This was a binding oath between a ruler and the one who chose her. An oath that demanded trials, sacrifices, and unbreakable loyalty. Rourke could feel the weight settling on his shoulders, but he did not flinch. He only looked at the queen with the same steady courage that guided him through the ruins of war. The queen slowly rose from her throne, each movement graceful yet tense, her long robes whispering across the smooth crystal floor like soft wind over water. She approached Rourke until she stood just a few steps away, close enough for him to see faint stars reflected in her silver blue eyes, close enough to feel a quiet power radiating from her presence. Human soldier, she said softly, her voice trembling with something she had never allowed others to hear. You have chosen a wish that binds destiny, not just fate. His breath eased as he replied, I chose your life because it matters. But the High Council was not ready to let this decision settle peacefully. From the shadows behind the throne, a group of elder advisors stepped forward, their faces sharp with political fear and anger. They began arguing in harsh whispers, insisting that the bonding law was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too tied to old prophecy. Some demanded they reject the ritual entirely. Others whispered about loopholes that could erase Rourke's choice without defying the law directly. The queen turned to them with slow, controlled fury in her eyes, reminding them that the law was absolute, that even she could not deny it, and neither could they. That was when the hall lights dimmed, flickering like dying stars. A warning signal pulsed through the crystal walls. Quick and urgent, the queen's eyes narrowed, and her voice hardened. Assassins are testing the shield line again, she said quietly. They grow bold. They sense weakness. Rourke instinctively stepped forward, his hand moving to the hilt of a fallen guard's blade. Even though his own weapons had been confiscated during the ritual, he scanned the edges of the hall, every instinct sharpened, every breath steady. The queen watched him with a look that was not just respect, but something warmer, something cautious and forming slowly like dawn after endless night. The guards rushed to secure the entrances, yet even they seemed shaken. The empire was unstable, fractured by rebels, shaken by war, and weighed down by secrets the queen had been forced to carry alone. Rourke realized that choosing her meant inheriting those burdens too, and instead of fear, he felt a strange clarity settle in his chest. As the warning faded, the High Judge announced the initiation of the trials, for the bonding could not be completed without them. Trial of battle, trial of mercy, trial of truth. 3 tests that would determine whether a human soldier could truly stand beside an alien queen. On equal ground, the queen looked at Rourke again, and for a moment her voice softened like a quiet melody. These trials are not meant to break your body. They are meant to break your spirit, she said. They were designed to reveal lies, expose greed, and crush the unworthy. Rourke nodded slowly, replying with calm strength, then let them see who I am. She held his gaze a second longer than necessary, and something in her expression shifted, a spark of trust forming against her will. The court witnessed it, and unease rippled across their faces, because trust between human and queen was something far more dangerous than war. That night, the first attempt on her life came. It was subtle, silent, meant to be untraceable. A shadow slipped through the upper balcony, gliding along the support beams like a whisper of death. Rourke saw the flicker of movement before anyone else, his instinct screaming, and he pushed the queen aside just as a blade flashed through the air. The sound of metal slicing wind filled the hall. Rourke tackled the assassin with raw force, both bodies crashing onto a broken section of crystal floor. The attacker hissed an alien tongue, striking with unnaturally fast movements. But Rourke fought like a man who refused to die before fulfilling his promise. He subdued the assassin with a final crushing blow. Breathing hard, muscles shaking, yet eyes steady and clear, the queen rushed to his side, her hands brushing his bruised shoulder, her voice trembling with something close to fear. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He exhaled slowly and shook his head. "Not enough to stop me," he answered. Her eyes softened, her lips parted, and the priceless expression she wore in that first moment of shock returned in a different shape now, warmer, deeper, impossible to hide. Word of the attack spread through the palace, and whispers followed, whispers of prophecy, of rebellion, of a human chosen not by chance but by fate. The council grew desperate, the enemies outside grew hungry, and the galaxy seemed to shift like a great beast waking from sleep. The queen looked at Rourke with a quiet conviction as she said, "Tomorrow the trials begin." He answered with calm fire in his voice, "Then tomorrow, I prove why I chose your life." The morning of the first trial rose slowly over the Arinth capital, its pale blue sunlight slipping through the smoke-filled sky like a quiet promise that refused to fade. The city was still wounded from the long war, its streets cracked, its towers scorched, but beneath the ruin life continued to breathe. Rourke stood on a balcony carved from shimmering crystal, looking over the land he once fought and now vowed to protect. His armor had been repaired, polished, and blended with alien metal that glowed faintly along the seams, a sign that he was now walking in a place meant for legends, not ordinary soldiers. Below him, crowds gathered near the trial arena, their voices rising in a soft storm of curiosity and doubt. They whispered about the human who had chosen the queen's life instead of power. They wondered if this bonding was a blessing or a threat. Some watched with hope, others with fear, and a few with the cold suspicion that he was nothing more than a pawn in a story, older than he realized. Rourke listened to the murmurs carried by the morning wind, but his heart stayed grounded, steady, and anchored to one truth. He had chosen to protect the queen, not to win fame or fortune, but because her life mattered, because she carried the weight of millions with dignity he could not ignore. The queen approached him in silence, her steps soft yet commanding. Today she wore lightweight ceremonial armor, its surface alive with shifting patterns of silver blue light. Her eyes held a calm expression, but beneath it Rourke could see a shadow of worry, a quiet fear she rarely allowed anyone to witness. "The trial of battle begins soon," she said gently. "It will not be easy." Rourke nodded, feeling her concern like a warm pulse against the cold air. "Fighting is the only thing I have done for years," he answered softly. "But today I fight for something different." A faint breath escaped her lips, something like admiration hidden behind royal restraint. "Then may your heart guide you more than your fists," she whispered. Inside the arena, thousands had gathered, lining the carved balconies and towering stands that circled the vast battleground, like a living ring of judgment. The ground was made of mirrored crystal panels, shifting in color according to the emotions of the crowd. Today they glowed between doubt and cautious hope. The High Judge stood at the center, declaring the start of the trial of battle, and 3 alien champions stepped forward, each representing a clan known for strength, brutality, and pride. The first was a towering warrior with armored skin like molten stone, the second a swift assassin with twin blades that hummed like trapped lightning, and the third a silent monk warrior with eyes like burning stars. They were chosen not to test skill, but to break spirit. Rourke stepped into the arena, the air tightening around him as if the entire city held its breath. The queen watched from her crystal balcony, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that pulsed like a hidden heartbeat. The first champion roared and charged, his steps cracking the crystal floor. Rourke moved with calm focus, dodging the crushing fists and using the giant's momentum against him. He struck with precision, not savagery, forcing the champion to stumble, then fall to one knee. The crowd gasped when Rourke delivered the final blow, not to kill, but to disable. He stepped back, allowing his enemy to breathe, and a wave of murmurs spread through the arena as people realized he chose mercy over dominance. The second champion attacked without warning, moving like a shadow wrapped in lightning. Blades flashed toward Rourke's throat, but he twisted, caught one wrist, and pulled the assassin close. Their movements were fast, sharp, brutal, yet never chaotic. Rourke struck only where necessary, forcing the assassin to drop one blade, then the other. In the final moment, When he could have ended the fight with one clean strike, he pushed the assassin back instead, letting him collapse in exhaustion rather than bleed. The crowd grew quieter, not understanding why a human would spare his enemies. The queen understood, and a soft warmth shimmered in her eyes, something delicate and dangerous blooming inside her heart. The monk warrior entered the arena last, silent as drifting snow. His movements were fluid, almost beautiful. Every strike a dance of precision meant to test more than strength, meant to test soul. He swept Rourke's legs, struck his ribs, and forced him to the ground with a blow that emptied his lungs. But Rourke rose, again and again, not driven by rage but by promise. Their fight was long, fierce, and elegant, like two rivers colliding beneath a storm. In the final moment, when both were breathless and bruised, the monk paused, studying Rourke with deep, ancient understanding. He lowered his weapon and bowed, offering surrender with a calm, respectful grace. The arena erupted in a mix of shock and admiration as Rourke stood victorious. The trial of battle was complete, and Rourke had proved himself not through brutality, but through honor, through mercy that shocked an empire used to strength without softness, through courage that did not seek praise, only truth. The queen descended from her balcony, walking toward him with slow, meaningful steps. Her eyes shimmered with emotions she struggled to hide, pride, relief, and something deeper that she could not name aloud. "You fought with strength and compassion," she said in a trembling whisper. "You showed them something they forgot." Rourke breathed softly, his voice steady even as his body ached. "I showed them who you deserve beside you." But beneath the victory, danger moved like a silent tide. The council exchanged worried glances. Rebels in the shadows carried messages of fear, and distant clans began to stir. The galaxy had witnessed a human win a trial meant to break him, and they did not know whether to fear him, praise him, or try to erase him. The queen looked toward the darkened sky above the arena, sensing the storm gathering in the distance. "The trial of mercy begins tomorrow," she whispered, "and enemies will not wait quietly." Rourke only nodded, his voice filled with calm fire. "Tomorrow I continue the path I chose." Night fell over the Arinth capital like a slow curtain of shadow, carrying the weight of secrets that never slept. The city was alive with whispers after the trial of battle, voices rising from every street and shattered tower, wondering how a human had defeated 3 champions, without spilling a single drop of unnecessary blood. Some believed he was a chosen figure from prophecy, others claimed he was a weapon disguised as kindness, but none could deny the strange shift in the air, as if the empire itself had inhaled a breath it did not know it was holding. Rourke walked alongside the queen through an ancient corridor beneath the palace, the walls glowing faintly with blue lines that pulsed like veins. These halls were rarely seen by outsiders, carved long before the empire's rise, carrying memories of forgotten rulers and wars that shaped the galaxy's bones. The queen moved with quiet authority, yet tonight her posture carried an extra weight, as if shadows pressed against her shoulders. Rourke stayed close, not out of fear but instinct, sensing the tension that clung to the walls like cold mist. "The trial of mercy will begin at dawn," the queen said softly, her voice echoing with a fragile calm. "It is not like the battle trial. This one tests the heart, not the blade." Rourke nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "Then I'll give them my heart's truth," he replied quietly. Her steps faltered for a brief moment, a small hesitation that revealed more emotion than she intended to show. She did not answer, but the faint shine in her eyes told him she understood his vow more deeply than she could ever confess aloud. As they reached the lower levels of the palace, a sudden tremor shook the crystal floor, dust drifting down from the arching ceiling. The queen stiffened, her eyes narrowing, like a predator sensing danger before it arrived. "That was no accident," she whispered, and before Rourke could respond, a piercing alarm rang through the underground tunnels. Sharp and urgent, a guard sprinted toward them, breathless and shaken. "Your Majesty, hostile forces have breached the old district near the Star Bridge. They are targeting evacuation shelters." The queen's face tightened, not with fear for herself but for the people. "The shelters hold thousands of civilians," she said urgently. "Children, elders, wounded families. They cannot be moved quickly." Rourke's blood surged, his instincts snapping into focus. "Show me the route," he said, already stepping forward. The queen reached out and grabbed his arm, her touch warm and trembling. "You are not required to face them before your trial," she whispered. "This danger is not part of the oath." He looked into her eyes with quiet fire. "I didn't choose your life to stand behind you," he replied. "I protect what you protect." Her breath caught, her grip tightened for a brief second. Then she released him with a soft nod filled with unspoken emotion. Together they moved through hidden corridors that opened into a vast underground transport chamber. Guards formed around the queen, but she waved them aside, making space for Rourke at her side. "The enemy will not expect you," she murmured. "Use that." Rourke checked the light armor given to him after the first trial, tightened the straps, and prepared to face whatever lay ahead. The transport hissed to life, shooting through the old tunnels like a streak of silver light cutting through darkness. When they arrived near the Starbridge district, the chaos was immediate. Fires burned along collapsed buildings, children cried in fear. Families huddled as enemy troops moved through the ruins like shadows hunting their prey. Rourke jumped from the transport before it fully stopped, sprinting toward the nearest collapsing shelter. He pulled a section of shattered steel aside with raw determination, helping trapped civilians crawl out as smoke and dust choked the air. The queen watched from a safe distance, but her heart raced with every move he made, her hands trembling at her sides, her breath uneven. She had seen many warriors fight for honor, but few fought for strangers with such fierce sincerity. Enemy soldiers spotted Rourke and moved in, their weapons glowing with lethal energy. He grabbed a fallen guard's plasma spear, spinning it with practiced precision. He fought with controlled fury, striking only to disarm, disable, and protect, not to kill. His body moved like instinct and purpose had fused into one. The queen could not look away, every heartbeat inside her chest clashing with awe and fear. Not for her safety, but for his. More enemies arrived at the Starbridge gate, trying to overload the power core that protected thousands hidden underground. Without hesitation, Rourke ran toward the structure, climbing shattered beams and burning platforms. The blast that followed sent a shockwave through the district, a roar of fire and sparks exploding outward. The queen gasped, her heart seizing as she watched the fire swallow him. But then through the smoke he emerged, coughing, wounded, but alive, carrying a small alien child shielded against his chest. The cries of the civilians softened as they saw him, their fear replaced by trembling hope. This sight spread across the district like wildfire, touching hearts in ways no command or speech could. By the time reinforcements arrived, the enemy had been pushed back, their plans shattered by one human who refused to let innocence burn. The queen approached him as he sank to one knee, breath ragged, armor scorched. Her hands touched his face gently, her voice trembling with raw emotion. "You saved them," she whispered. "You saved my people." Rourke looked at her with exhausted clarity. "I will always protect what matters to you," he said. Her eyes glowed with warmth and fear intertwined, because she knew more clearly than ever that this human was not just passing through destiny. He was becoming part of it, far in the shadows. Unseen enemies watched the scene unfold, their whispers dripping with fear and anger. The bond between queen and human was growing stronger, too strong, too dangerous. They would not allow it to continue without striking back. Dawn broke over the capital like a wounded light trying to heal a battlefield, soft and uncertain, its glow spreading across shattered rooftops and quiet streets that still trembled from the night's violence. Rourke stood on a balcony overlooking the city, the smoke of burned shelters rising in thin gray ribbons that curled into the sky like fading prayers. His body ached from the battle, his armor scorched and dented, but the pain inside him felt deeper, heavier, a mix of exhaustion and fierce determination that refused to fade. He had saved hundreds the night before, yet he knew the storm was far from over. Behind him, the queen approached with soft footsteps, her robes whispering across the polished crystal floor. She looked at him with a mixture of awe, concern, and something she no longer tried to hide. "The Empire speaks of you," she said quietly. "The people call you the protector already." Rourke kept his eyes on the rising sun, the light brushing across his bruised face. "Names don't matter," he murmured. "Lives do." The queen inhaled softly at his words, her gaze warming with a tenderness she had never allowed herself to feel for anyone in her position. "But your name carries hope," she whispered, "and hope can move worlds." Before they could say more, the High Judge arrived, flanked by guards, his expression torn between fear and admiration. "Your Majesty," he announced, "the trial of truth must begin before nightfall. The clans demand it, and the council insists." The queen's eyes darkened at the mention of the council, but she kept her voice steady. "Prepare the chamber," she said. "We will attend shortly." The judge bowed and hurried out, leaving the two of them alone in the soft morning light. Rourke turned to her, sensing the tension building behind her composed expression. "What is this trial?" he asked gently. She looked down for a moment, as if searching for words within the folds of her own heart. "It is the trial that reveals who you truly are," she said. No weapon, no armor, no hiding, only truth. They descended into the heart of the palace, deeper than Rourke had ever been. The air grew cooler, quieter, filled with ancient energy that seemed to breathe with the walls themselves. At the entrance of the truth chamber stood a mind seer, an elder alien whose silver markings glowed faintly beneath thin, translucent skin. Her eyes shimmered with layers of emotion and knowledge far beyond anything human. She bowed respectfully to the queen, then turned her gaze to Rourke. "You carry many shadows," she said softly. "But shadows do not always mean darkness." The queen stepped beside Rourke, her presence protective, almost defiant. "He is here by my will," she said, "and he will face your trial with honor." The seer led them into a circular hall where crystal walls reflected soft swirling colors, each hue responding to the emotions within the room. Rourke stepped into the center, feeling the ground beneath him pulse like a living heartbeat. The seer extended her hands, and threads of gentle energy wrapped around him like floating ribbons of light. "This trial does not test strength," she said. "It tests intention, motive, the deepest truth of the soul." Rourke closed his eyes, letting the energy sink through him. He felt the seer's presence inside his mind, searching, not harshly but carefully, peeling back layers of memory and pain. Images flashed before him, memories of war, of helpless civilians, of friends lost too soon. He saw himself as a young soldier, full of anger and confusion. He saw moments where fear ruled him, moments where he chose mercy even when it made him look weak. He saw the queen, her eyes full of secrets, her strength wrapped around fragile hope. He felt the moment he chose her life, not out of desire or ambition, but out of a conviction that her life held more meaning than he understood. Emotion swelled inside him like a wave crashing against a cliff. Raw, honest, unstoppable. The seer stepped back, her eyes widening as she absorbed what she found. The walls around them shifted in color, glowing with deep shimmers of blue and gold, the shades of inner purity and unbroken loyalty. She turned to the queen with a trembling voice. "He is true," she whispered. "His heart carries no greed, no hidden desire for power. He protects because he cannot bear to see suffering. He chose you not to claim you, but to save you." The queen exhaled shakily, her hand rising to her chest as if trying to contain the emotion, threatening to break through her royal composure. She took a step toward Rourke, her voice soft as silk brushed by wind. "You let them see you," she whispered. "All of you." Before Rourke could speak, the chamber trembled with a sudden blast. The walls flickered, the crystal lights dimmed, and distant screams echoed through the corridors. A guard burst into the chamber, his face white with terror. "Your Majesty," he gasped. "The Star Bridge is under full attack. The enemy fleets have entered the sky above the capital. Their ground forces are moving toward the throne hall. They seek to capture you and kill the human." The queen's face tightened with a mix of fury and fear. Rourke stepped forward immediately, his voice firm and steady. "Then we fight," he said. "Together." The queen met his gaze, her heartbeat echoing in her trembling breath. "The Star Bridge controls every fleet in the Empire," she said. "If they seize it, the entire galaxy burns." Rourke nodded, his stance firm, unwavering. "Then we hold the bridge," he replied. "No matter the cost." Her eyes glowed with emotion so deep it made her voice tremble. "You are not bound to this battle," she whispered. "You owe me nothing." Rourke reached out and gently touched her hand, the gesture soft but powerful. "I chose your life," he murmured. "I stand where you stand, outside." The sky darkened as enemy ships descended like a storm of metal and fire. The ground shook beneath the weight of war rising again. The queen and Rourke sprinted toward the Star Bridge as the city braced for its greatest battle, fate pulling them into a confrontation that would decide the future of the Empire, the balance of worlds, and the bond growing between their hearts. The sky above the capital broke open with fire as enemy fleets descended, their engines screaming like wounded beasts tearing through the clouds. The Star Bridge towered ahead of Rourke and the queen, a massive ring of living crystal rising from the heart of the city, glowing with shifting energy lines that pulsed like veins feeding the entire empire. It was beautiful, ancient, fragile, and tonight it stood on the edge of destruction. Rourke ran beside the queen through the trembling corridors, the floors shaking under the shockwaves of orbital bombardment, the vibrations traveling through their bones like distant thunder calling them toward fate. The queen's breath trembled, not from fear of the enemy, but from fear of losing everything she had fought to protect: her people, her worlds, her fragile hope for peace. And now the human whose presence had cracked open her guarded heart. She glanced at Rourke as they ran, noticing the scorch marks on his armor, the bruises along his jaw, the determination blazing in his eyes. You don't have to go first into danger, she whispered breathlessly. I am your ruler. You are bound only by choice. Rourke shook his head, his voice steady even as explosions shook the air around them. And I choose to stand where you stand, he said softly. Always. They reached the outer gate of the Star Bridge just as a squad of enemy soldiers stormed the plaza. Plasma rifles firing bursts of blue fire that shattered the crystal tiles underfoot. Civilians screamed and scattered. Guards tried to hold the line, but were pushed back step by step. Rourke drew a fallen guard's spear and leaped into the fight with raw determination. He moved like a force shaped by purpose, each strike powerful yet controlled, knocking aside weapons, disarming attackers, shielding wounded guards with his own body. The Queen watched him with breath caught in her throat, her heart tightening at the sight of one man standing against a tide of violence, simply because he could not abandon those in danger. With Rourke leading the charge, the guards regained ground, pushing the enemy back toward the shattered pillars around the bridge's base. But before they could celebrate even a moment of relief, the ground beneath them trembled again, this time with a deeper, darker force. A massive dreadnought descended from the clouds, casting a shadow over the entire plaza, its underbelly glowing with the hum of a core cannon, powerful enough to crack the Star Bridge in half. The Queen's eyes widened with terror. If that cannon fires, the Empire will lose every gate and every world at once, she whispered. We cannot let it charge. Rourke looked up at the colossal ship, a silent fire spreading through him. How do we stop it? He asked. The Queen swallowed hard, her voice breaking. Its core spine must be severed from inside, but the ship is fortified. Even I could never reach the central hull. Rourke tightened his grip on the spear, his voice steady like a promise carved in stone. Then I'll do it, he said. Her eyes widened in fear. You won't come back alive, she whispered. The core chamber is a death trap. Rourke stepped closer, the chaos around them fading as their eyes locked. Your world dies if that ship fires, he murmured. But if I break it, your world lives. Her breath trembled, her anger and sorrow mixing. Why must you bear this alone? She whispered. Rourke touched her hand gently. Because I can, he said. And because I promised to protect your life. Before she could protest, the Queen ordered her elite guard to open the emergency gate to the ship's landing spire. Rourke sprinted inside, the Queen watching with a pain that twisted through her like an unhealed wound. She wanted to call him back, to command him to stay beside her, but she knew she could not. He was fighting not because law demanded it, but because his heart chose it. That truth terrified her more than any enemy fleet. As Rourke ascended toward the dreadnought, the Star Bridge shook from repeated cannon impacts, cracks spreading across its luminous surface like lightning trapped in crystal. The Queen stood on the plaza, issuing commands to evacuate civilians and deploy remaining forces. But her eyes kept rising to the sky, searching for any sign of him, whispering silent prayers she never believed she would speak. Inside the dreadnought, Rourke fought through narrow metallic corridors filled with armored soldiers. His muscles burned, his senses sharpened, his breath ragged but determined. Every strike he made echoed with purpose. Every step carried the weight of millions who depended on his success. He reached the central hall at last, the air shimmering with heat from the glowing energy reactor that throbbed like a beating heart, ready to explode. A group of political prisoners were trapped behind a containment field, shouting warnings. One of them, an old scholar with glowing tattoos of prophecy, gasped when he saw Rourke. You are the chosen protector, the scholar whispered, the human who binds fate with mercy. You must sever the core spine, or the galaxy will fall. Rourke climbed the reactor frame despite the scorching energy burning his hands. He lifted the plasma spear, electricity biting into his skin, and with a roar of effort he drove the blade into the core spine. The ship shook violently, lights exploding in showers of sparks, alarms blaring across every chamber. The cannon above the city flickered, dimmed, and died, leaving only silence. The dreadnought began to collapse, fires erupting around him as Rourke stumbled back, breath shallow but burning with victory. He forced open a maintenance hatch and threw himself through. Just as the ship cracked apart behind him, a blinding flash filled the sky, the explosion shaking the entire capital. The Queen watched the fireball with wide, trembling eyes, her heart stopping as she whispered his name. Rourke, she choked, fear and love tightening her voice until she could barely breathe. Then through the drifting smoke and falling debris, a silhouette emerged, limping, wounded, coughing, but alive. Rourke stepped onto the plaza, his armor charred, his face streaked with soot and blood, but his gaze steady and unbroken. The Queen rushed toward him, her breath shattering with emotion. her hands trembling as she touched his face. "You came back," she whispered. "You came back to me." Rourke managed a tired smile. "I promised," he murmured. Her eyes filled with tears that glowed like shimmering crystals under the fading firelight. And for the first time, she let emotion win over royal restraint as she pressed her forehead gently to his, breathing him in like he was the last piece of her world still holding together. But above them, the enemy fleets regrouped, thousands of ships darkening the sky once more, and a whisper spread through the capital like a cold wind. The final battle had only begun, and destiny was moving toward its greatest storm. The sky above the capital glowed with burning clouds as the enemy fleets gathered again, thousands of ships forming a dark wall that stretched across the horizon like a living storm. Rourke stood beside the Queen on the shattered plaza, his breathing heavy, his wounds raw, yet his spirit unbroken. The people around them whispered his name with trembling hope, calling him the human who returned from death to defend their world, calling him the protector fate had sent when the galaxy needed it most. The Queen looked at him with a depth of emotion she no longer tried to hide, her eyes shimmering like stars drowning in dawnlight. "They will strike harder now," she whispered. "They want the throne, the bridge, and your life." Rourke met her gaze with calm fire. "Then let them come," he murmured. "We stand together." The star bridge pulsed weakly beneath them, its once bright energy lines flickering like a candle fighting wind. Engineers scrambled to repair the shattered sections. Guards took defensive positions. Medics pulled survivors from rubble. And yet through all the chaos, the Queen remained steady, her presence binding the wounded empire with invisible strength. Rourke could feel her fear beneath her calm, but he also felt something deeper, a trust that ran through her heart now like a quiet river that refused to break. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, anchoring her, and she leaned into that touch with a breath that trembled like a rising wave. Suddenly a hologram flickered to life above the plaza, showing the enemy commander, a warlord draped in obsidian armor, his eyes cold as void stone. "Erinth Queen," he roared, "surrender yourself and the human who dares stand beside you, or we reduce your city to ash." The Queen lifted her chin, her voice calm but sharp like a blade wrapped in silk. "You speak of destruction because you have already lost the people's faith," she replied. "Strike if you wish, but know this. The Empire stands not by fear, but by those who protect life." The warlord's eyes narrowed as he looked at Rourke with hatred. "You chose a human, and for that your name dies with your throne." He spat before the hologram vanished in crackling static. The Queen turned to Rourke, her heart torn between dread and a quiet, rising strength. "He means to break us in one final strike," she said softly. "He will throw everything at the bridge." Rourke nodded, gripping the spear he carried, his voice steady. "Then we make our stand here," he said. "For your people, for your throne, for the promise between us." Her eyes widened slightly at his last words, and a warmth spread through her chest like light, filling a long dark room. She stepped closer, her voice softer than breath. "I do not fear the storm when you are beside me," she whispered, "and I do not fear my own heart anymore." There was no time for more. A violent tremor ripped through the plaza as the warlord's full assault began. Energy bolts rained from the sky like falling stars, explosions roared around them, and enemy soldiers descended in waves, racing across the shattered ground toward the bridge. Rourke charged into the storm with guards at his side, fighting with every ounce of strength he had left. His spear cut through the chaos, sparks flying with each clash, his muscles burning, his breath heavy, but his resolve unbreaking every moment he fought. The Queen watched him with her heart thundering against her ribs, every strike he made, echoing inside her chest like a thunder that carried both fear and love. But the warlord himself arrived soon after, landing in a blast of dark energy that cracked the ground beneath his feet. He towered in black armor, his voice echoing with malice. "Step aside, human," he growled. "The Queen's life belongs to the rightful conqueror." Rourke stepped forward, placing himself between the Queen and the warlord, his stance firm, unshakable. "Her life belongs to no conqueror," he said quietly. "I chose her life to protect it, not to let it fall into your hands." The warlord lunged with a roar, the force of his strike shaking the air. Rourke blocked the blow, the impact sending a shock through his entire body. But he held his ground, refusing to move, refusing to break. Their battle was brutal, sparks flying with every clash, the ground cracking beneath their feet. Rourke fought with nothing but his will and the promise burning inside him, while the warlord fought with rage and hunger for power. With each strike, Rourke felt his strength slipping, his breath tightening, yet every time he staggered, he looked toward the Queen. and something inside him forced him back to his feet, refusing to fall. The warlord raised his blade for a final killing strike, and the queen gasped, her heart freezing. But before the blow landed, Rourke twisted, driving his spear into the warlord's power core. The armor cracked, light exploded, and the warlord let out a scream that echoed through the entire battlefield. Before collapsing in a burst of dark smoke, the enemy fleet hesitated, ships flickering with confusion and fear. Their commander was dead, the bridge was defended, and the people stood behind their queen and the human who defied death again and again. The queen stepped forward, sending a broadcast across the empire with her voice steady and bright. The era of fear ends. Today, she declared, from this moment on, the throne will stand with the people, and the protector who chose my life will be bound not by chains, but by shared duty. Her message ignited a wave of hope across every world, and slowly, one by one, enemy ships powered down their weapons and retreated into the shadows. The battle was over, but the world was changed forever. The queen walked to Rourke as he leaned heavily against a broken pillar, exhaustion shaking through him. She cupped his face with trembling hands, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief, pride, and something as deep as the galaxy around them. "You saved my people," she whispered. "You saved my throne, and you saved me." Rourke looked into her shining eyes, his voice soft and raw. "I told you I would stand where you stand," she smiled, her expression warm and priceless. The same expression she wore on the day he chose her, now filled with peace and something tender enough to break the strongest heart. She leaned her forehead gently against his, closing her eyes as if anchoring her soul to his. The people watched in silence as their queen and her protector stood together in the fading light, bound not by conquest, not by law, but by a choice that defied an empire and reshaped destiny. And as the sun rose over the rebuilt Star Bridge, the galaxy whispered the legend of the human who chose an alien queen not for power, but for love, and the queen who chose him back not by law, but by heart.